All right, so we're going to start with a quick running analysis with a focus on the foot and ankle. Just a quick note, like in general about running analyses, I don't really get my patients on the treadmill and look at their running form until they can run pain-free. If they have pain initially and it goes away after a while, that's another thing. We can have them run when that happens, because usually we get them on the treadmill long enough that that pain should go away before we start recording. Reason being, if someone has pain or the run is different because of the pain, it's changing their stride, then we don't really want to go in and look at their running form because it might be different from what it normally is, and then you're not really getting valid information as to why this injury happened in the first place. So we're going to focus mostly on the foot and ankle, but just a few general notes about a running analysis. I'll usually have my patient go through whatever warm-up they normally do before a run. If they don't warm up, then that's something you definitely want to address. An active warm-up is good that just has some dynamic stretches. It doesn't have to be that long. The warm-up that I put my runners through takes about 3 minutes for them to do, so it's not like it's this huge long thing that's very inconvenient for them. After that, we'll get them on the treadmill. I tell them to just take as much time as they need to feel like they're warmed up and to get to their normal, just kind of easy run pace, like a distance run. There is some value looking at faster speeds if your runner's more competitive, but usually I'm doing my running analysis just at regular distance run pace. So the first thing we want to do when we're looking here, this is going to go in slow motion in a second, but I take a video 20 seconds usually from the side, from the back, and then from the other side. 20 seconds is good enough because we want to actually count how many footfalls they have in those 20 seconds and then multiply that by 3 so we can get their cadence. We want their cadence to be 180 steps per minute. If people are significantly slower, we want them to gradually work up to 180. Reason being, if someone has a slower cadence, they could be overstriding, which leads to a bigger heel strike. That can also lead to increased loading at the ankle, hip, and knee, which could be leading to an injury. So that's the first thing I like to look for. The next thing I like to look for generally with a focus on the foot and ankle is the foot strike. So you can see this runner here. He does have a little bit of a heel strike, but it's just barely there. If you were looking at him run in real time, you might actually see that as more of a midfoot strike. I don't like to go crazy with my athletes here about trying to convert them to a midfoot strike if they have this much of a heel strike. He's clearly not overstriding. He's not that far past his center of mass, and loading at the hip and ankle is going to be, and the knee for that matter, is going to be pretty good. So that's really what I can look at from the side in terms of the foot and ankle. We also want to make sure they're dorsiflexing enough. I typically don't draw lines on the video and check. I'm just looking for symmetry to the uninjured side, and I want to make sure that it's not very severely limited on both sides. So that's usually what I look at here from the side view. Let's see if we can go a view from the back here. When we're looking at the back, again with a focus on the foot and the ankle here, I want to make sure that rear foot pronation is not excessive. Now this runner's in a neutral shoe. If I was seeing excessive pronation, which I'm definitely not, we would probably want to get him in a more supportive shoe or put a supportive insert in the shoe he already has. Sometimes getting running shoes can be a pretty costly barrier to care. So usually if someone bought a new pair of shoes and they're not like really close to the end of the lifespan there, we can throw a supportive insert in there. A good quality supportive pair of inserts can be, less than $40. For rear foot pronation, we want to make sure that the normative values, we want to make sure that within the normative values, which our reference value is 8 to 15 degrees. I don't know if anyone can eyeball 8 to 15 degrees. So again, I'm looking for symmetry, and I'm looking for anything. If it is symmetrical, I'm looking if it's way outside that normal range. If someone's way under that 8 degrees, then we might want to put them in more of a high cushion shoe. Pronation helps decrease ground reaction force at the ankle, knee, and hip. So if they're not pronating, then they could be having greater ground reaction force going up the lower extremity. So usually we fit those people with a high cushion shoe. These people, like this runner here, that doesn't have anything wrong with his loading in the frontal plane, I just kind of leave it alone, put them in a neutral shoe, or if they're in a shoe that's not changing their mechanics too much, not a big bulky shoe, I'll just leave it alone. The next thing I want to look for here is the amount of rotation, internal, external. You might have noticed here, this runner actually has a little bit of a toe in on his left side, and just from knowing him as my patient, that's his injured side. So that definitely was playing a role in his injury. Normally, I like to see less than 10 degrees of toe out. Anything more than that, you're putting a lot of stress on the medial compartment. And you definitely don't want any toe in. So we worked hard to correct that. When I talked to this patient, he said he used to walk with a pretty severe in-toeing gait as a child. And as you can see, his right uninjured side is pretty good. But looking at that left foot, he's in-toeing a little bit there. So with these changes that we want to make sure we're doing that gradually. I really don't push to have someone change, their cadence or their in-toe all at once. Usually I tell them, for 1 minute on your run, focus on it, and then go back to kind of zoning out and just getting the mileage in. And I've had success with that way. It kind of gets, easier and easier as they try it. And then they typically don't have to focus on it as much, and then it becomes second nature. In terms of the foot and ankle, that's really all I'm looking at. If I'm looking at it very quickly, we do have a more formal running analysis program where we are looking at specific angles, and we're going through that with the runner and trying to change these things, or just showing them how they deviate from the norms. But in my experience, at least, if there's a subtle change, like if this patient was at 6 degrees of pronation instead of 8 degrees, I'm not really going to touch that unless I really, really think that's the only cause. We could do a lot more time on running analysis looking at things at the knee and the hip, and even into the thoracolumbar spine, in terms of counter rotation of the pelvis and the trunk. But for now, that's really all we want to look at for foot and ankle, because that's what we're focusing on today. In the future, we can maybe look at a more detailed running analysis. I'd be happy to do that. People can shoot me an email if they're interested in getting more information about that. And I hope this kind of sheds a little bit of light on the general procedure that we like to do for these running analysis.